You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is December 18th, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today, we're not going to have a guest with us. We're going to talk about some recent topics in the news and from sort of a liberty perspective. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So the topics we're going to hit today, we're gonna talk about something that's going on in Arkansas, where the government is actually forcing people from other countries, I guess Chinese nationals, to sell land that they own. So that's kind of a little bit of a weird story with some liberty implications. And then we're going to kind of home in here in California on the bullet train, sort of a tale of two trains. We've got our sort of disastrous bullet train in the Central Valley, and yet there's another bullet train that's sort of popping up between Las Vegas and Los Angeles that maybe has different fortunes in its future. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the mainstream media's war on misinformation or disinformation, and now maybe they're sort of the cause of it. And finally, we'll get to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, where we find out about Biden's secret Jewish heritage that he recently shared with us at a press conference. But before we get into that, let's go to our quote of the day, sort of a new segment we've been running. And James, maybe you could bring up the visual. So our quote of the day, sort of a liberty-inspired quote, is from Frederick Bastiat. So he was an 1800s French economist, an assemblyman there, an author who had a lot of great insights on liberty. And this is a famous one. It definitely pops up in a lot of places. And he says, when goods do not cross borders, soldiers will. So sort of noting that, if countries are sort of invested in each other and sort of voluntarily interacting, they're a lot less likely to be shooting at each other. You guys have any thoughts on that particular quote?
Yeah, I have a thought. That's one of my favorite quotes because it applies to the global war on terror in many ways, or some of these other skirmishes we love to get involved in. And the first thing is, they cut off, what's it called? They just stop trading with these countries, trying to make them behave. The United States does this, and they make other countries stop trading with these, like Russia is a prime example. And it's just how to make bad matters worse. So there's no negotiation, and then the next thing you know, there's shooting going on. So it happens all the time, and the United States is extremely good at making sure that goods do not cross borders.
I don't know, Tim. I'm going to take issue with that statement you just made, that the United States is good at making sure that goods don't cross borders. I mean, we have one of the biggest markets in the world. A lot of goods cross our borders, and we export a lot of stuff too. I mean, why would you say a thing like that, though?
Well, because it's not that our goods are not allowed to cross our borders. It's not like it, but okay. Could you buy Russian goods today? Could you, if you wanted to buy Russian vodka directly, can you do that today?
How about
can they cross our borders?
How about Cuban cigars too, right?
How about Cuban cigars? Yeah, there's a good one. That's a perfect one right there. How about Cuban cigars? Can you buy those? No, of course not. And, here the Cuban cigar sellers of the world have lost out, except for the black market, which my one of my sons was pretty good at bringing some Cuban cigars after he made a visit to Cuba one time and brought home a box, smuggled it home. But aside from that, they do not have a way, the Cuban cigar makers do not have a way of enriching themselves with our lucrative market that you clearly identified. And So as a result, then the people of the countries that are selling these goods are not as rich as they normally would be if they were allowed to trade with the United States. And so as a result of that, they do not become richer to be able to fight the tyrannical regime in which they live under. Usually is the case. Iran is another good example, right?
But where do we draw the lines between our political enemies and our economics, though? Where do we draw the line, though?
Well,
okay. Let me give you an example.
You don't.
World War II, when we were fighting the Germans, one of our great allies. I mean, should we continue while World War II was going on, or the aftermath of World War II, while the Nazis were ruling Germany? Should we have been trading with Nazi Germany?
In World War II, the soldiers from Germany had already crossed the borders. After that happens, then all bets are off. But prior to that, I'm talking about the modern day methodologies of fighting wars by the United States are to, first of all, cut off trade. That's the first thing they do.
And real quick, Tim, before you move on from World War II, I just wanted to jump in there as well. One thing that we might notice as well, and by the way, we do have a little bit of weird sound going on in the background too, but one of the issues that might be that you might tie this into for World War II as well, was that we put all these economic restrictions on Germany after World War I, such that probably a lot of goods weren't moving across those borders. I mean, we were forcing them to do reparations, but I think they were internalizing a lot, which might have also caused, been a cause for World War II. So just to throw a little fuel on the fire here.
No, it is a valid point. Your point is well taken, Jason, about the restrictions after World War One. I will concede that. That is a valid point. But the question is, I still want to know, where do we draw the lines? Is it that regardless of the political situation between us and our enemies, are we supposed to continue trading with them?
Now, I think when they have, here's the way you want to draw that line. If they have already sent their soldiers across their borders into other places, that's where you stop trading with them. Because the soldier movement has already occurred. So that's a good place to start. That's where you draw the line. Prior to that, you want to continue trade so that you can continue negotiations to continue avoiding soldiers crossing borders, either from them to yours or yours to them.
Well, and just to jump in on this as well, I think part of the issue as well is that as we trade, we become invested in each other as well. And so when we do, it's almost like, I would shoot over at your country, but I might hit my 401k. I can't have that. So I'm going to be a little less trigger happy as I start aiming those guns. Of course, it's funny, Joe Biden doesn't appear to be that guarded on his trigger. In fact, he's blowing up pipelines, last I heard.
Oh, more pipelines?
Pipeline. Well, technically, he's nuked too. He nuked our what did they call that one that was supposed to come from Canada?
XL pipeline.
The XL pipeline, and then of course he nuked the Nord Stream too as well. So he's Mr. Trigger happy.
He does not like pipelines.
I feel like his attitude with those pipelines is his attitude with shotgun self-defense. Just shoot it out the door.
Shoot them in their knees. I will concede that there's a very a ticklish issue here about where do you draw the line. Even though I still think there are some issues here to be said about our political conditions in relation to our foreign enemies, but I would hope we would stay on the side of trading goods and services. But I think we cannot ignore some of the realities of the world.
Well, this is a good transition of where do we draw this line to our first story. and it actually has to do with the state of Arkansas. And James, maybe we could get our invisible hand, James Just, maybe we could get this visual up here. It is a story about how Arkansas has a law in the books where if you are, I guess, a country that it deems as an enemy, I guess, then they will not allow you to own land. And so it came to light a few years ago, I guess, that a Chinese company owned some agricultural land in Arkansas. And let's see, I'm trying to find the name of the Chinese company.
Shenzhen.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, and the crazy thing about the story is that this company had owned the land since 1988, I believe. So, and it was just recently that they decided that these guys are sort of like enemies. And they're dangerous, and therefore they want to force them to sell the land. And they actually are hitting them with like a $280,000 penalty too, because they're claiming that in 2021 they didn't file some kind of a form saying who the that it had sort of Chinese ownership. It's actually the parent company is something called China Chem or Chem China or Chem China, that's it. That's the Chinese national chemical company, I guess. But I guess they have some sort of an ownership in this company. And so they're forcing them, they're giving them 2 years to sell the land. And I guess the question is, does that make a lot of sense? I mean, should we be limiting people from investing in this country from overseas? Certainly we had a big scare back when I was a kid about, the Japanese, they're buying up too much land. And, that turned into a big overblown concern. But I remember there were a lot of people practically apoplectic that too many Japanese were buying golf courses and other things over here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what do you guys think about this story? This seems, like it's maybe, is government too heavy-handed here, or is this crossing that line you're talking about, Leon?
Well, I mean, whenever the government get involved in anything in the private markets, you always have to be concerned. However, with this particular situation, and there are some national security issues here that are being raised. For instance, the Chinese also own a bunch of land up in, I think it's Montana, or one of these places. It was very close to some very sensitive military sites that the United States as a whole own and operate. Now, when we have people who are not seeking our best interests and they're buying land so close to sensitive military sites, is there a case to be made that this should be forbidden? Now, being of course of the liberty mind, I would tend to think no, I would not want that. But I do not want to discount the national security issues that may be involved in some of these decisions by some of our lawmakers. But the government getting involved in private markets is always leads to a disaster, and I can't see how it could be avoided here. Now, the case in Arkansas, the land have been in the hands of the company, Jason, you said, since 1988. And all of a sudden now it's become a security threat. And I mean, you just don't see how the dots all add up, that they could force them to divest of the land when it was legally purchased and legally operated. You just can't see how this could withstand any sort of legal scrutiny, which I think is eventually going to happen. These laws will be challenged in court, no doubt. And I would hope it will be, the government will be forbidden from doing these things. But we still have to be concerned about the national security threat, especially when those land purchases are close to sensitive sites, military sites.
Yeah.
Mises had a good article on this, and they blame it all on crony capitalism, where guys like Bill Gates that contribute to the Republican Party was behind this, and he's the largest.
Bill Gates did what? Say that again.
Bill Gates is the largest landowner in Arkansas, privately.
And what about the Republican Party, you said?
And he has contributed handsomely to the Republican Party, and the Republican Party was behind the.
Bill Gates is a very well-known left-wing Democrat.
He still, when it comes to his property and the people in charge in Arkansas are mainly Republican, he has contributed to the Republican Party, according to the article. I don't know. Perhaps the article is wrong, but as a result, and some others too, that I can't remember the other one they pointed out. So these landowners now, when you force more land to be on the market, then that drives the price of the land down. And so they are the government is artificially forcing more of the product being available, in this case, land. And so therefore its price is going to drop when the Chinese are forced to sell. So that's what the gist of their article is that at least in this case in Arkansas, is crony capitalism, is the government helping certain connected private people like Bill Gates to be able to get bargains they normally would not be able to get without government interference.
Well, I would want to throw just a little bit of pushback on that, because I can completely agree with you that there may be an issue that maybe this is benefiting Bill Gates because it's forcing a particular competitor out. But also, this would have a damping effect on the number of buyers, right? Because if I'm coming from another country and I see that, I want to buy land there, but they may just, like Pemex or something else, the government may just take my land right away at some point arbitrarily in the future, right? Then maybe that's going to also damp the demand for land as well if there's less foreign buyers who are interested in buying in the future because of issues like this. So, maybe it's short-sighted.
But the whole argument that this is some sort of issue of crony capitalism, the whole argument, everything that both of you guys have suggested will drive the price of land down, and then worse yet, in the case of the of foreign nationals not being able to buy land, you're cutting off demand for land, which will almost permanently drive prices down. Why would any landowner want that? This is totally irrational.
Because they have no intention to sell in the future. They want
no intention of selling.
What's that?
Who have no intention of selling?
Like a Bill Gates that wants to just continually buy up land for growing food. Well,
I take issue with that. How could we say that nobody will have no intention of selling their land? We do not know what the economic circumstances will be 5-10 years from now. We don't know.
Well, before you guys respond, let me throw into what the governor of Arkansas said in a recent press conference on this. She said, "We will make sure that every company operating in Arkansas is a friend to Arkansas and good to hardworking Arkansans." So that's sort of the logic behind it. As far as the politics go,
we know
that is nonsense, right? We know
that's nonsense. Okay, because I was wondering how she reconciles that land has been owned by the Chinese since 1988. Is that what you said? 88?
Yeah. 88, yes. Yeah. That's in the article. Yes.
So now all of a sudden, after that length of time, she's worried about the poor beleaguered Arkansasians, and what they don't get to work the land. You know what, the Chinese import the Chinese workers to work the land? Is that how that works? And they don't truck stuff to and from. Nobody buys the goods that come from the land. I mean, what's going on here? Yeah, it is nonsense.
Yeah. Well,
but the whole thing is, even though I don't want to totally dismiss the whole issue of national security and all that. But what would be the issue is not that they could take up the land and move it someplace else. The land is there and is there permanently, and we still have some effective control over what could be done on the land. I mean, we're not going to sit down there and let them build a nuclear site on the land. Nobody's going to permit that, or something like that, to say a nuclear site that could be in the future used to attack military assets here in the United States. So I don't even understand the logic of even forbidding foreign nationals from purchasing the land. I don't understand the logic of it.
I don't think that's the. I think that's the feigned logic. It's not the real logic.
Yeah, that's the Warhawk washing
Yeah.
of this. But it does bring up a point. Yeah, exactly. But it does bring up a funny kind of point. Is that if I were the U.S. surveillance state, wouldn't it make it a lot easier on me if, like, China raised a big flag and says, "Hey, this is where we are"? I mean, if they own a certain piece of land, that makes it a little bit easier to spot where they might be spying from, right? I mean, yeah, because I mean, what's to stop them really from paying off some other opportunist like a Hunter Biden who might own some land from just going there and using his land to spy on us from, right? But and that would probably be harder to pin down unless it was a guy like Hunter Biden who had a sign that says "I'm open for business" with foreign governments.
Back to the point, what could possibly be the logic of forbidding the purchase of land by foreign nationals? I mean, and also it also is where are you going to draw this line? Okay, so if a U.S. subsidiary of a foreign country, say like Shell, for instance, Shell is a well-known established company. They've been here for God knows how long here in the United States. So if Shell purchased land in Arkansas, are they now subject to this law? I mean, this is kind of ridiculous when you think about it.
Yeah.
Or BP for that matter, well-known established foreign companies, are they now subject to the law?
Yeah, and in the economic aspect of it, a lot of dollars go to China in trade. So those dollars are over there, and what do they do with them? Well, it's not a bad thing to get those dollars back into the United States economy. So they come and purchase land here. Those dollars go to the landowner, Americans, and they take that money and they invest it elsewhere in the United States. So the money is circulating back to the United States after going over there. When we buy their goods and stuff. So in my opinion, that's a good thing. It's a good circulation of the money and brings it back home to sell land to them.
Yeah. Well, I think also too, these things they give China, maybe a reason to cooperate a little more with us if they have assets over here, and likewise us with them. So
yeah, that's another thing the article pointed out is that if they're vested in the United States, they know that if they go to war with us, we'll just take over that land and kick them out and just tell them, go pound sand. And so that's an impetus or a motivation not to go to war with the United States. It's this my whole thing about trade, about it's similar to trade because trade is both goods and money to purchase the goods. So you want that circulation going on all the time, or you're going to get other bad things coming over the border.
Okay.
We're still on that quote after 23 minutes. Wow.
Well, I think it's time to derail this topic and head to another topic. And we want to talk about this train fiasco that we have going on here in California. And so, Jane, maybe our invisible hand can bring up the image of this visible hand of the government, this childlike hand of the government, trying to design our fast train project here. And I think this hand with this little choo-choo is a little more successful than California is doing right now with the high-speed rail and trying to guide that. And so we have a little bit of video from Reason that we wanted to show as well on this. But essentially, this is almost like a tale of two train projects. We have this one that has been going on since 2015 here in California, this bullet train, where anybody who lives in California knows it's just a ridiculous eyesore. There's no working train. There's just a lot of track that's sort of been laid out in various spots within the Central Valley, not really doing anything. Anybody who takes that drive to Bakersfield, I guess, to Sacramento is going to see, sort of the pieces pieces of this track that are just out there. They've been out there for years, and there's nothing happening on it. And so it's blossomed from a project that started out at the promise of tens of billions to now hundreds of billions, or at least over 100 billion. So, and on that same note, a much more, and by the way, that train project was started. I remember when Jerry Brown was our governor, and he took a trip to China, and I remember seeing an article of him on the Chinese bullet train. And in the article, he's saying, "We've got to get one of these." so that's, essentially just the planner deciding that, hey, this communist regime has one, I want one too. And so, Jerry Brown, one of the more responsible Democrats, I guess, because there aren't that many of them. He totally went down totally down the Kool-Aid on this one. And it's been one of the bigger boondoggles of his administration. But that is, like I said, just blossomed into this horrifying project, and now we're so far into this. At the same time, there's another train project that's just starting up, where they've made plans to go from Los Angeles to Vegas. Now, that one, there's a little bit more economic drivers. It's a little more market oriented. It's by a company that's actually trying to make a profit is running it, which, that's kind of like a dirty word in California. But, since Vegas is involved, I guess, they've got their cards on the table a little better, so to speak. But anyways, let's see some of these video clips so we can kind of understand a little bit better what the scope of the problem is here on this project. So, you know what? Before we get into that, we're almost out of time for this segment with our with our public access audience. We have to let them go in about 30 seconds, so I don't want to get into that video clip just yet. But yeah, another aspect to this story, too, is the Biden administration has just promised to dump $3 billion into both of these projects. So both this hole in the ground in California, essentially, and $3 billion to sort of juice the Vegas project as well. And in that sense, it almost seems like, he's trying to jump ahead of the parade that's already sort of on track by throwing money at them. But if you are watching us on public access, like I said, we've got some interesting video we're going to show on this, and we're going to go further into the discussion. So you can follow the rest of this conversation on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, or Spotify, and you can go there to hear the rest of the story and find some other interesting interviews we've done with people fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. So go check those out. Anyways, so back to the discussion. So James, maybe you could bring up video clip 1 that talks about some of the problems that they've been having. It gives a little background to the bullet train.
There has been one ambitious effort to build high-speed rail in the U.S., in California, but that project turned into something so foolish that it's almost a crime. According to Quentin L. Kopp, the former state senator who was crucial in rallying support for a $10 billion bond measure to build high-speed rail in the state. He became a fierce opponent of the project when it ran out of money, and the agency in charge, he says, broke its promises to voters. The 520-mile railway, which has received more than $20 billion in state and federal subsidies, but after 15 years of construction, they've only laid track for a 170-mile stretch in the Central Valley. Brian Kelly, who took over as the CEO of the California High-Speed Rail Authority in 2018, says that the project was initially mismanaged.
They got into construction out of sequence, and they got into construction before the authority was ready. As a result of that, if you're trying to get into construction, you've got a contractor mobilized to build, but you're behind on right-of-way, you haven't moved all the utilities, then you're going to run into delays and costs.
The cost of the project has ballooned from $33 billion to about $128 billion. Can you give us some reasons for why?
Big wow. That's just wow. $128 billion. So a $10 billion bond to start with, and then ballooning into $128 billion. So that's part of the story, but we said I had to make some breaks in there. Can we watch the second video clip too? And that's going to give just a couple more reasons of why this has gone out of control.
The project climbed in price in part because its planners decided not to use existing traffic corridors or rails, opting for a longer route with many more stops.
Politicization that led to this really flawed plan that's costing way more than if they'd followed I-5 and didn't have to do as much massive tunneling and the real estate acquisition and the endless litigations, having to divide hundreds and hundreds of farms in half and fight with them over condemning their land. That has delayed things dramatically.
Brightline is also building in California.
Okay, so that also talked about some of the land rights issues as well, and just sort of how politics got involved in steering, I guess, the course of this train as part of the issue. So I guess just focusing for a moment on our California bullet train. What are your guys' thoughts? I mean, you guys are Californians. Maybe you're seeing this from different sides of the spectrum here. What do you guys think of this?
Crony capitalism.
Go ahead, Tim. Tim, go ahead.
Just crony capitalism is people trying to, that are the people. I can't. What is it? Who was the politician whose husband was involved in this and made billions off of this? Was it? It was a.
Maybe it was Nancy Pelosi's husband you're talking about?
Yeah, Nancy.
Or Dianne Feinstein, one of them. I don't remember which one, but it's one of them.
I thought it was Nancy Pelosi's husband. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, they're involved in all this. It's just crony capitalism. So let's make some money off the backs of the taxpayers. Why not?
I mean, this whole bullet train business is just you're just seeing your money, our tax dollars just going down a crap hole. That's all that's happening here. Mm-hmm. They're never going to build this train. We know that, okay? And look at how they're destroying farmland to build this boondoggle. I mean, it gets back. We almost stand this song like broken records here. When the government is involved in anything, which is what is happening here, it always leads to a disaster. We started off with this $10 billion bond, which I voted against, thank God. Mm-hmm. Started with this $10 billion bond, and now we are up to, this thing is going to cost right now $128 billion, and we know that it's not going to stop there. It's going to be maybe 200, maybe 250 billion before it's all said and done. And who is going to pay to support this thing and maintain it and subsidize it? It's we, the taxpayers. So this boondoggle is going to continue for as long as we are involved in this project. We should, if you want the honest truth, we should cut our losses right now. We should stop this damn nonsense and let the market decide on how we are transported from point A to point B in California. Let the market decide these things. And it can do it. It have done so effectively here in the United States for the last 200 and almost 50 years. But here are these people coming along trying to tell us that they know best. And it's a disaster.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that this original bond measure was voted on and passed by the majority of California citizens. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Then here we go again. Once again, the California citizens that vote for this kind of nonsense get what they deserve, and here we are. And so my.
Well, it's certainly taken for a ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Ride to nowhere.
A very scenic ride down a crap hole. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
They never learn. They never ever learn. It's always about, I know what the motivation is. Oh yeah, I'm not going to get on the train, but everybody else should get on trains. Oh yeah, I'm going to fly. It's a lot easier and it's faster and all that. So I'm just going to fly, but everybody else, all these peons, they're going to ride the train because that's better, because it's better for the environment. It's going to be fast, blah, blah, blah. So that's what they're thinking. We're going to save the planet because we're all going to die if we don't. But of course, we're going to drive our cars and fly in our bullets. And the rest of you peons can have fun getting on this bullet train to nowhere.
They'll drive their gasoline powered cars,
Yes.
And everybody else will have to get on the train. Yes.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things about this too is the idea of how market-driven these things are. In one of the company that is actually working on the one from Vegas to LA claims there's a sweet spot. They say if you get two major population areas that are about 300, 250 miles apart, that's long enough that most people won't want to drive it, and it's short enough that it doesn't make as much sense to fly. So they're claiming, this is the sweet spot. And maybe we can take a look at that video, James. It's the number 3 video that we have, and that'll tell a little bit about this Vegas train.
Also building in California, developing its own 218-mile rail line running from Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga, which is on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The company is betting that travelers will opt to leave their cars at home and avoid airport hassle.
We acquired property in Victor Valley. We acquired property in Las Vegas. We have rights of way from the California and Nevada Departments of Transportation, so we were able to do it without eminent domain.
Reininger says California's high-speed rail project has to clear far more regulatory hurdles than Brightline.
They have different environmental regulations that they're subject to, and their system profile is just very different than the entrepreneurial private sector approach.
But unlike its Florida line, Brightline West is not going to be a test of whether rail can be commercially viable, because the company is banking on about $3 billion in federal subsidies through Joe Biden's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Poole is skeptical.
It becomes far less of a business venture and much more of we can do grand things because we don't have to worry about what it costs.
Yeah, and so certainly there's this $3 billion investment, but the bottom line, though, is that this company still is driven much more by market incentives than, and we're talking like $12 billion is what they're looking at, versus this $10 billion California project that had hands in it. One of the crazy corruptions I saw too, and I remember, is that everybody wanted the train to come through their town. So you had all these politicians wrangling and changing the plans constantly over where that train was going to go. And so instead of this being a fast trip directly from Los Angeles to the Bay Area, it wound up making all of these side stops that would cause it to be a slower train and run in slower areas. Also, everybody could claim they had the bullet train coming. So, it's just, one thing after another with, government planning that causes so many of these things to go awry. But they did mention, though, that sweet spot, because I remember when they first started this, it seemed like a solution in search of a problem, right? I mean, we could, I occasionally drive to LA. It's about a 6 mile or about a 6 hour drive, roughly, and that's manageable. Or if you really want to fly, you can do that. But by the time you jump through all the hurdles with the airport, it's sort of like, okay, well, maybe you're saving yourself a couple hours, maybe 2.5 hours or something if you decide to fly. So, maybe there's a case for the bullet train, but it just, let the market figure it out. Whereas, this other one, you can see, with the Vegas traffic going from LA to Las Vegas on the weekends, that can really back up in some areas of the freeway. So I think, maybe that's really solving a problem for a lot of people. And plus it'll be market driven, where it's going to, it's a company figuring out whether people are going to actually be paying for this with their tickets and not just with government IOUs. Yes, so
you see this is the problem with the left. These things just highlight the problems with the left in terms of their thinking. I mean, look at. I mean, at one time, our main mode of transportation at one time was horse-drawn buggies, right? That was, 120 years ago. Look at today. Uber have come along and totally revolutionized the transportation of people from point A to point B. I mean, you could sit on your phone. You could sit in your home, pick up your phone, and you call Uber, and they'll show up at the front door, and they could take you wherever the hell they want to go. Probably even take you to Los Angeles if you want to. If you could, there are some markets where things like that can happen. But the point is though, the government is interfering with the proper functioning of the marketplace, and they're making a disaster out of it. And they're expecting us, the honest taxpayer, the hard-working taxpayer, to pay for their mistakes. And they keep doing it over and over, whether it's on transportation or whether it's in this whole climate change boondoggle that we are not paying for with solar and wind and everything. You're seeing it all over, where the government is interfering with the proper functioning of the marketplace. And then what do they expect? Oh, we have to pay our fair share. We have to pay our fair share to cover their boondoggles. This is the disaster of government. And what we are seeing in the Central Valley right now, and we all here live in California, is just the continuation of that whole mentality of the boondoggles that they try to build, and then we have to pay for them, so that we have to pay to bail out their mistakes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I guess my only point, I agree with Leon on that, is that I've made this trip from San Diego to Las Vegas, and it could be a nightmare coming back, especially on a Sunday night. We're talking 8 hours. Not 2.5. It may be normally with traffic rather, but it's literally bumper to bumper the entire way back. And I'll tell you one thing I'm not going to do. Instead of driving or taking Lyft or Uber to the airport, if I'm going to be without a car in Las Vegas, I'd rather just take the 20-minute drive, however I get there, to San Diego Airport, fly for 40 minutes or whatever it is. It's a short trip over to Las Vegas and be there at the airport, close to center of town, and then rent a car, and I've got my transportation around Vegas for the weekend, and then come back on Sunday, same thing, and it's just a short trip, and then boom, I'm home. I'm not going to drive all the way to Rancho Cucamonga into LA, the heart of LA. We're talking now that's going to add 4 or 5 hours to your trip on a Sunday night on the weekend. It's another nightmare. That the trip back, okay, because LA is a complete nightmare. That's what we call it hell A for a reason down here. And that's not going to work for me, because I'm going to be in the same predicament when I get there in the bullet train. I'm not going to have a car, okay, so I don't have the advantage of driving to Vegas, okay. I don't have and having my own car, not having to rent a car. So people are going to people are going to weigh all these time and money constraints, and I do not predict success for this bullet train, even if they do get it built. I don't think there's going to be enough people occupying it to make it worthwhile.
Well, Tim, the one thing that might happen, though, is you may get enough people in LA taking it that it lightens your drive on the freeway. Causes you to want to drive a little more.
That's possible.
The one thing that does worry me just a little bit with this, though, is with him punching the $3 billion. And I kind of think this one has a better chance for success because it's tied to Vegas and a lot more business interests. So it's much more likely to get done, I think, than what's happening, being run by central planners in California. But that said, by Biden pumping some money into this, then you may be able to tie a government label onto this, where if it's successful, suddenly it gives a bunch of rationale for pumping money into other ill-advised train projects throughout the country. And he did just approve during his administration like a $66 billion influx of money, I think, into rail in general. So this guy is kind of got a deep pocket for big rail, I guess.
But Jason, that point you make about giving this I think it's Bright Line, they call it. They're gonna end up taking $3 billion from the government, and if this thing succeeds, then of course we're gonna be hearing this thing about public-private partnerships. Notice we've been hearing a lot about that these days, and we're hearing a lot about it in climate change thing too. But the once in a while where you may see some success with these so-called public-private partnerships, you do see a few successes here and there, if you could call them successes. But it also sets up, just like you said, the rationale for more of these public-private partnerships, which leads to more public-private partnerships of disaster. That's what it does. So even if this thing does end up being successful, the Bright Line does end up being successful, it's still doesn't change the fact that we are always dealing with disasters when we have the government picking winners and choosers in the marketplace, winners and losers in the marketplace.
Well, I feel like government being involved in the marketplace or public-private partnerships are sort of like a breeding ground for misinformation or disinformation because everything is wrong usually about those stories and the incentives that are set up. But that does bring me to some of what the media has been doing with misinformation and disinformation. There was a story that came out earlier this month, and it was a Texas newspaper. Maybe, James, you could bring up the visual real quick. They had run a story on Ted Cruz saying that he wanted to limit preferred pronouns in a bill that he was pushing in Texas. And of course, the bill doesn't say anything about limiting preferred pronouns, but it got tagged that way, and so everybody just started repeating it. And I guess it's just, it got over 6 million views, this tweet that was claiming that by this newspaper. And it strikes me as really similar to the story we heard in Florida, where they had this "Don't Say Gay" bill, when it did nothing of the sort. It simply limited certain things that small children could be exposed to, like third graders and below. And suddenly that turned into "Don't Say Gay," which is just like, almost a non sequitur, I guess. Essentially we're trying to ban books that were showing graphic images of sex and sex scenes, some of them homosexual, I guess, but the idea saying that this is not allowed for them to show in K through 12 schools to kids third grade and under. So I mean, it's just like, we see this misinformation that's being constantly pumped out, but it gets worse than that. It's not just simply getting the stories wrong. They'll literally talk over people who are trying to tell you what their views are, what the truth is in their perspective. There was a recent discussion, a town hall that Vivek Ramaswamy was at, where he was being interviewed by this reporter, by this correspondent. I can't think of her name. Abby Phillips. Okay, Abby Phillip, and she was essentially wouldn't let him talk. She was asking him a question. He was trying to answer it, and then she started talking over him so that he couldn't get his answer out. And so I wanted to play this. We've got this broken down into a few clips here, but first, the key issue here is that he said during his presidential debate, his most recent presidential debate, that he felt like January 6th was an inside job. And that got a lot of eyeballs to him for saying something like that when none of the other candidates would go that far. And of course, we've seen all kinds of things that were things that it felt like the government was hiding from us about the story. And certainly the mainstream media seemed to be covering up a lot of these details as well, or certainly they weren't dogged in pursuing a lot of the details that the government was hiding on this. And so she asked him about this, and he gets ready to respond. So let me first play clip number 4, and that'll show him setting up the question. So she's asked him the question, and he's going to start to answer.
Inside job to describe what happened on January 6th. The next day, Capitol rioter Alan Hostetter highlighted your comments at his sentencing. He is going to prison for 11 years. Hostetter threatened members of Congress. He brought a hatchet, knives, pepper spray, stun batons, tactical gear to the U.S. Capitol. Are you concerned that a convicted felon like that is now promoting your comments in court?
So here's my concern, Abby, and I want to tell you guys where I'm at. If you had told me it's close to 3 years ago that January 6, 2021 happened, if you had told me 3 years ago, back when I was a biotech CEO, not steeped in this world, I was just consuming passive media, but was focused on my world of developing medicines. If you had told me that January 6 was in any way an inside job, the subject of government entrapment, I would have told you that was crazy talk. Fringe conspiracy theory nonsense. I can tell you now, having gone somewhat deep in this, it's not. I mean, the reality is this. We do have a government, first of all, we have to acknowledge, that has lied to us systematically over the last several years about the origin of COVID-19, about the Hunter Biden laptop that we were told was false by 51 CIA experts and otherwise before we now know that it was true. You can go straight down the list, the Trump-Russia disinformation collusion hoax, all of it. Now we come to January 6th. The reality is we know that there were federal law enforcement agents in that field. We don't know how many. I think it's shameful. And if I may finish just answering,
well, let me
this is really.
So that's where the sparks start to fly. So he's given the sort of the lead into his answer, and then she immediately jumps in and starts to talk over him so that he can't go any farther with this. I did think it was kind of interesting, the fact that if you look what CNN did there at the beginning of that interview, they immediately took what he was saying about maybe this being an inside job and different parts of this narrative that he's saying don't make sense, and saying that, oh, because one guy who is on trial at January 6th, because one guy who might actually be a criminal is using this in his defense, that somehow it doesn't make anything he's saying is true, when we've actually seen a lot of these people being prosecuted simply for walking into the Capitol when police are letting them come in. So, I mean, this is, we're literally seeing this stuff happen with our own eyes, and CNN is telling us, don't believe your lying eyes on a lot of this. Well, Vivek, in this next clip, he starts to, try to continue his answer, and she tries to just shut him down. So let's see the second clip here real quick. This is clip 5.
I think it's shameful. And if I may finish just answering.
Well, let me
this is really important.
I'm gonna go ahead and interrupt you here because you're
I know
saying that there
establishment doesn't approve of this message. I know
that there were federal agents.
We should be able to talk about this.
You're saying that there were federal agents.
This is important to talk about.
You are saying there were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th.
Yep.
There is no evidence that there were federal agents in the crowd on January 6th.
So why, before Congress, when pressed on what the number was, they didn't say there were none? They just couldn't say how many there were.
So you're saying that that you have not seen any evidence that there were.
We've seen multiple informants suggesting that there were. We know people were FBI informants who were asked to.
Is there any evidence?
May I just finish this, and you can come back and question me?
Well, let me clarify.
I know this is very uncomfortable for you.
I'm going to clarify my question.
I know this is an uncomfortable issue for many people, but we have to do the truth here.
I'm going to clarify my question because I want to make sure that you understand what I'm asking.
I understand this deeply. And I told you, I was with you 3 years ago. I'm not there now.
Where is the evidence?
Yes.
Where is the evidence that the government had a plot, an inside job,
but no, I'm going to tell you what an inside job is, because I'm not
violence on January 6th?
I'm not going to let you put words in my mouth. I'm going to put my words in my mouth. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that.
Where is the evidence that the government was involved in planning or executing January 6th?
So I'm going to give you hard facts. And if I may, Abby, I know this is going to be a little uncomfortable, but we're going to go through this, and you can push back on it after that. And you can push back on that. And let's do this fairly. Why?
No, you can see that he is trying to get his answer to the question. I mean, and she is not letting him get that out, which is just absolutely insane. And he's making it real clear. Hey, look, I know there's a narrative you guys don't want to hear, but we're going to say it anyways, even if it makes you guys uncomfortable. But it just is amazing that this is a news organization, and they're not at all curious about why the government hid so many pieces of this video. They're not curious at all about so many of the things Ramaswamy is talking about here. They're just interested in hearing what the government tells them and re-saying it, which is absolutely crazy. Let's go into this last clip, because this tells the end of Ramaswamy's talking points on this, and hearing her push back on it.
Let's do this fairly. Why did they suppress footage of now what's been released, 200 hours of footage of shooting rubber bullets into that crowd, shooting tear gas into that crowd? You didn't see that before. You saw what the response was to that. Now you see footage coming out of actually rolling out the red carpet for Capitol Police allowing people in,
again,
right through the front door.
The vast majority of
that video evidence should have been released before, Abby.
Mr. Ramaswamy, the vast majority of the footage shows police officers being overrun
and I want to talk about one more
by
case.
violent
this is really important.
rioters. That's
I'm going to give you some hard facts.
Of it shows.
So here's what entrapment is.
Cherry pick.
I'm not cherry picking. If I may finish, Abby. If I may finish, Abby. I'm not cherry picking.
Examples.
To the contrary. To the contrary. You know who cherry picked? You know who cherry picked? The government.
That is what happened.
The government cherry picked 12 hours of footage when there was 200 hours of footage. So cherry picking was the government, not me. Release the whole thing. And let me just finish one thing, too, because this is super important as a topic.
So
I think this is a civil libertarian issue of our time. Gretchen Whitmer's kidnapping. I want to be really clear on this, because it's the same issue in the same FBI, same even part of the FBI. 3 people who were in an alleged plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer were acquitted at the end of trial because it was entrapment. That is, government agents put them up to do something they otherwise wouldn't have done. They gave them credit cards with spending limits of up to $5,000, encouraged them to buy munitions, plan something they weren't otherwise willing to plan.
So, I mean, there we see, Cult News Network literally trying to step on everything he said, not curious about any of these things, just going along with the government narrative. And the crazy thing is, we never see them do this when they have Joe Biden or somebody else on. They just lap up everything he says, whether it makes sense or not. They just go right along with it. And, here he's bringing up things, and they have not the slightest bit of curiosity. In fact, she even accuses him of cherry picking when it was the government who literally, Ramaswamy, they cherry picked. They literally showed us only what they wanted us to see. And eventually, when Republicans took control of the House, we got to see it all and suddenly realized, hey, there's a lot of different stuff happening here. And anyways, what do you guys think about this? To me, it seems like just manufactured news where they're just simply trying to create a disinformation dystopia that they keep us controlled with.
You see, these so-called news networks like CNN, they have chosen a side, okay? And the side is not the liberty-minded. The side is the left and the Democrats. This woman in particular, Abby Phillips, who ironically and incidentally has Trinidad roots. This woman is a political hack. She was once involved in one of the biggest cringing that ever occurred on national TV. She once declared that Donald Trump is the worst president in American history on live TV. And Jake Tapper, who is no friend of the left, even had to cringe at the statement that she declared. This is a political hack trying to take down somebody on the right, which, of course, Vivek. You may disagree with some of Vivek's statements and that kind of stuff, but he's very clear-minded about the things he's saying. There is nothing controversial about the fact that the FBI had agents in the crowd on January 6th. There's nothing controversial about the fact that Donald Trump said clearly, we shall march down peacefully, let our voices be heard. There's no controversy about these things. That was very, very clear. The video also showed the police was opening, the Capitol Hill police was opening the gates and allowed people to walk into the Capitol. There's nothing controversial about that. But you see, the left narrative cannot stand that, you see. They cannot allow that to be said on national TV if they could avoid it. But the video is showing this. There's a man named Ray Epps that we have on video saying we have to go into the Capitol. We have to go into the Capitol. It is alleged that that man was an informant for the FBI. Now, the FBI just recently charged him with some light misdemeanor, no big deal. A lot of people have gotten a lot harsher sentences for just walking around on the Capitol grounds on January 6th. But this man named Ray Epps, he just got something light. Why? Even that point that Ramaswamy raised about the kidnapping of the alleged kidnapping attempt of Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan. Yes, some of the people were acquitted because the FBI was involved. The dirty hands of the FBI were involved. So why is it so, to this woman who's supposed to be an objective reporter, why is it so controversial to hear the fact that, well, the FBI may have had their dirty hands involved in January 6th, and there's no dispute about that?
Apparently, well, yeah, that's great points. Apparently, people still watch CNN. That's my biggest shock. And apparently, the Vivek people that schedule his interviews agreed to go on to a CNN-based interview, and be railroaded like that, which is very rude, by the way.
Yes.
You're just listening to two people talking instead of the guest that you're supposed to get the information you're looking for, at least his opinion. Why does anybody agree to go on to CNN to be interviewed? That's the second question, the thing that shocks me. So in the future, I would not expect that people from the Republican side, at least, or Libertarian, either one, to go on to that show, because they obviously are just going to be railroaded by whatever host they put up. I don't know if it has to be her, but anyway, that's my shock right there.
Well, yeah, I will say this about Vivek. He is fairly fearless about getting his free media. So he will go anywhere. He's talked to people with all kinds of podcasts and, friendly or unfriendly. He's even on that show with Charlemagne the God, I guess, and some of these others who certainly are not friendly to anybody who's not on the left. So so these are, he is, I guess he's trying to get that free media that, in controversy everywhere he can get it. And I kind of respect him for that, because he's keeping the conversation alive in places where it's quite frankly become a cult echo chamber over there. I mean, I see CNN as cult news network. That's all I see it as.
It is said that he was part of the reason that Don Lemon got fired from CNN, which, so you are right that he'll go anywhere and take on anybody, which I kind of like myself, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, and Vivek, in case any of you didn't know that reference, he got on an interview with Don Lemon. They were talking about, I think, some DEI thing or something, some kind of a racial issue. And they got, and Don Lemon told him, I think, that he wasn't the right skin color to talk about these issues. And Don Lemon lost his job over it. So they got in a heated argument. So anyways, but you know what, we're getting close to out of time, so it's a good time to jump to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, and somebody who the left never censors, and they probably should with some of the stuff that he says. We're going to go to our favorite knucklehead, at least a knucklehead gaff machine, Joe Biden, and we're going to hear about his secret Jewish heritage that nobody ever knew about, and he recently revealed at a press conference. James, could you bring up the visual first, real quick, and then we'll. He was giving a talk on the events that happened on October 7th, and of course, October 7th is the massacre that happened when Hamas fighters breached the Israeli border and wound up killing over 1,000 people in some of these, what they call kibbutzes. And those are like little sort of towns that have been established by Jewish settlers. And these people came in there and they just murdered everybody, stole things, just a huge issue of terror, essentially. I mean, they just mutilated bodies, kidnapped people, just terrible. And of course, that's what's behind this current conflict between Israel and Hamas. But here's Joe Biden talking about it and personalizing the story, as he often does in ways that challenge truth and reality. Here we go. Can we have the clip?
The Holocaust. 65 years. After October 7th, my father returned to his kibbutz to salvage what he could from his home. What was left was the rubble and ruin. The home, which he had hidden in with his wife and his daughter for 20 hours before being rescued.
So, Jane, maybe we could bring the visual back up again for the story. So what he said there, and you didn't mishear it. He said, after October 7th, my father, he said, a father, so his father is a father, apparently, returned to his kibbutz to salvage what was left of his home. What was left was rubble and ruin. So, and of course, Joe Biden's dad has been dead since 2002. So I don't know. I mean, this is our commander in chief, and he's made the story about himself somehow. This terrible tragedy. What do you guys think of this?
Well, hey, listen, okay. Joe Biden have Jewish roots. He have Puerto Rican roots. He have Caucasian roots. He have roots from all over the place, okay?
Well, and he marched with Mandela. Remember that? He marched to free Mandela.
Yeah, he was arrested in South Africa because he had the honor of trying to go see Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, there's no actual evidence of that, but he claims he did. So nobody else remembers.
That's what he said. Yes. He also desegregated the theaters in Delaware during the civil rights movement, and on he go. This man have a history that is so comprehensive that I don't think there's any other human being on planet Earth that could match this man's history. But the only little problem, there's one little problem about it. It's all in his mind. He's sick cognitive decline in mind. That's all it is. There's something is wrong with this man, seriously wrong with this man. It scares me every day to think that this man has the codes for nuclear weapons right at his fingertips. This is scary stuff you're talking about here. I mean, we may laugh and joke about the gaffe this man will make over and over again. You know, we come in so accustomed to it that we just laugh about it. But this man has the nuclear codes. Think about that for a second. This is scary shit. Pardon my language again. But this is unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know. I think he's got a problem with his mind, but I think it's just that he wasn't trying to really say that he's got Jewish heritage or that it was his father. I think he just made a mistake in his mind as he was assembling that statement. And instead of saying a father, which he really wanted to say, he said my father. Oops, a father. Which is what he really meant. Personally, I think that's what was going on in his mind.
Well, I just have a little bit of a pushback. How did he misremember going to march with Mandela? I mean, was he remembering his father there or something?
Yeah, that's a different story there.
No, but you know, I mean, here the only problem I will have with what you just said, Tim. Mm-hmm. This guy is the president of the United States.
Yeah.
This man have speech writers galore that we are paying for. They must have written down something for him to say when he was going to talk about this horrible incident that occurred in Israel. They must have written down something, and he couldn't even read it.
Yeah, I think so. I think he probably saw the words of the sentence and then was thinking about it coming up, and instead of looking directly and reading it word for word, he just put my father instead of a father in there, and then he, you know, it happened fast. It's like when you're doing karaoke, you know, you're looking at the screen, you're looking up, you're looking at the screen, looking up, that kind of thing.
Well, even a father is kind of vague for something that's kind of a graphic story. I would think he'd have some detail. I mean, this is the problem with him. He has lied about so many things in the past. He's claimed that he was at the top of his law school class, and back when the press used to check him on this stuff, then they came back. In fact, that's part of what knocked him out of his first presidential run back in I think it was at the 80s or 90s back then. And
it was 88. You know, 88. He claimed that he took a speech from
he was plagiarizing everybody.
From Neil Kinnock. And Kinnock was talking about his own family, and Biden made it the history of his own family, the Bidens in the coal mines. So supposedly.
That's why his dad was a coal miner. Who knew? and he's been a truck driver as well. That's part of Biden's narrative, which, you know, who knew, right? Yeah. I mean, normally, Tim, I'd be completely charitable and give him this if this were like a one-off, but the guy does this as just his normal course of action. So it
has happened. These things happen too often for this just to be, well, you know, it was a simple slip of the tongue, right? Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who always a slip of the tongue is no fault of the mind. But in Biden's case, a slip of his tongue is clearly a fault of his mind. There's no doubt about it.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying there isn't a mind problem going on there, but I think in this particular case, it was just more of a slip of the tongue, personally.
Well, I think forked tongues tend to slip a little easier.
Yeah, you've got two of them to contend with instead of one.
Well, I think we've pretty much reached the end of this topic and this show, but I do want to thank our listeners for joining us, and just remind you guys too that what this show is about. We're trying to reach out to talk with people who are involved with forwarding issues of liberty in their region or across the country, and it's really about trying to get people interested in figuring out what they can do in their communities. And it's funny too, because when one of the things that started the quote stuff off at the beginning of the show was Milei recently got elected in Argentina as president. So I just want to keep coming back to this. This is sort of inspirational, I think, to anybody who's liberty minded, the fact that, these things can happen. If people try, if people do work towards these things, we can get people elected. And James, maybe I could bring up this last visual here. This is a quote that we did to start kicking off our liberty quotes here. And he said, "I did not come to guide lambs. I came here to awaken lions." And so I'm kind of hoping that, some of what we do on this show will be to wake people up to ideas that maybe you can get started with something in your community, or, get involved thinking about what you can do to further the cause of liberty, because we're seeing a lot of people challenge these things for us, and it's slipping away, and we really got to stand up and make ourselves heard. So thanks again for joining us for this one. Until the next one, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.